Hi everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. Today I am finally going to tackle the chore of cleaning up my stock tanks for the fall season. And they have gotten pretty crazy. I've shared that before. I have some tomatoes that got a little wild, and my tomatillos, which I always try to plant by themselves in their own space, have definitely bullied their way in anyway into the pathways and over next to the tomatoes. They are pushing and shoving their way through. So I definitely need to clean those up. But I want to talk about a couple of things. One is soil refresh, and the other is garden pests, and what I'm going to do to prevent and treat the ones that I have here right now. I've shared before that I have been battling an infection with root knot nematodes in some of my stock tanks. There were 3 in particular that I have been working on since last season. Now, I've been using a lot of natural treatments because I just don't want to use chemicals in my garden if I can at all help it. So I planted in the spring some marigolds in 3 of these stock tanks. Marigolds will secrete a toxic compound from their roots that's very bad for nematodes, which is exactly what I want to happen. I do not want them to be feeling comfortable or well fed in these stock tanks. I want them to shrivel up and I want them to go away. So I decided that I was going to plant some marigolds in this space, and I love marigolds because they are one of my favorite colors, which is orange. They actually come in a lot of different varieties, from the tiny little petite ones to the really tall ones and everything in between. So they are a really lovely plant. Marigolds will also draw in a lot of pollinators and beneficial insects to your garden. So there are a lot of great reasons to include marigolds. I know that they are kind of an old school flower and that they are not always the coolest and the most popular nowadays when we have so many other options, but I really love marigolds. And who doesn't like to relive memories of their 6-year-old childhood when they were planting marigolds in those little styrofoam cups in their kindergarten class, you know? So it's just, I love marigolds. I love the way they smell, I love the way they look, and I love their functionality. So even though I had to take some of my stock tanks out of my normal rotation for producing vegetables, I still got the benefit of everything else that they provide. But now that we are coming into fall and the cooler weather, those marigolds are starting to fizzle out. So I really need to find a different option for the cool season. And the option I have chosen is mustard. A few years ago, I grew some giant red mustard. I actually grew it for a couple of seasons. It's a beautiful plant. It's got green veins and these huge leaves that are a really deep purple color, like a plum color. And they're a beautiful plant for sure. So I loved how they looked, but I didn't love how red mustard tasted. So I found that I was using the space in my garden to grow something that I didn't really like to eat. So I saved those seeds back because I'm a seed hoarder and I really hate throwing away seeds. So I hung on to the seeds. When I got my seeds out, I saw that the sell-by date on the seed packet was 2020. So we're well over 5 years past that. I'm gonna go ahead and get those mustard seeds out. I'm gonna sow them in at least one of the tubs, and I'm gonna just grow it as a treatment for the nematodes. So let me explain that. There are quite a few brassicas that can be used as biofumigants. And if you let them grow and you let them flower and then you chop them up and then you incorporate them back into your soil, they will secrete chemicals that are really bad for certain soil-borne pests and pathogens, one of them being nematodes. And without getting into all the chemistry of that, it is just a really great natural treatment for trying to help your soil recover from pest infestations or to prevent it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to plant this mustard, let it bloom, chop it up in the spring, and then add compost right over the top and just blend it all in. And hopefully that will be an unwelcoming gift to the nematodes come spring. I'm going to follow that fall and winter treatment up with more marigolds next season, and hopefully by next fall I will be able to plant other things in these tubs shrubs. But it is just a risk you take when you bring in other materials from outside. You don't know if they have been properly produced or tested. And in this case, I think it really was a contaminated bag or two of soil that I used to top off some of my stock tanks. I'm still watching and waiting for the other stock tanks in this area. The ones so far that have been affected are the ones that are 2 feet tall and 4 feet long. They're the smaller oval-shaped stock tanks. And it is a bummer, but you know, sometimes these things happen. It definitely makes me a lot pickier with the companies that I choose to purchase from. I want to talk just for a few minutes about what root knot nematodes are. When I've mentioned them in the past, people have asked me follow-up questions like, what are they and can you make a video about it? And I'm going to give you a really short description today so that you know what I'm talking about, and then I'm going to follow up with a video that is a lot more in depth when it comes to root knot nematodes, and that way you know everything that you need to know so you don't worry unnecessarily about them. So let's talk about those nematodes first. Root knot nematodes are a microscopic roundworm that live in the soil and on plant roots. They have a needle-like mouthpart that they will pierce plant roots with, and they will breed, lay eggs, and just complete all of their life cycles either in the soil or in plant roots. There are some signs and symptoms that your plants will exhibit that will make you get a little suspicious that root knot nematodes are present, and that is what has happened with me. Last season I had some plants, some mixed plantings in one of my stock tanks, and so they were all different kinds of plants. I had some tomatoes and I had some beans and some other things, and none of it was doing well. And I knew I had refreshed the soil. I knew that the nutrition in the soil was good, that my irrigation was consistent, that they got plenty of sun, but not too much. So I had covered all the bases with these plants, but they were not growing well. They were yellow, they were stunted, and so I just wasn't sure what was going on. Well, I decided that I was going to pull up some of the plants just to see if I could find any, you know, evidence of disease or anything. So when I pulled up some of the plants, they looked like a string of pearls, kind of. That's exactly what nematodes will do to roots when they're present, these root knot nematodes. They will cause those roots to start to enlarge, so it looks like they are really lumpy, and a lot of times that they will have like little enlarged structures that really do look like pearls on a string. Sometimes they also just look really chunky and really bumpy, but that is the easiest way that I can think of to describe it. Now, this is different than bean plants. If you pull up a legume plant and you see nodules on those roots, they're small, and the root material that is in between those nodules is of normal size. And those are the nitrogen storing nodules on legumes, and that's what makes growing them so great for your soil. But when you have root knot nematodes, the entire root is completely deformed, so it looks much different. There are many different species of nematodes. Some of them are beneficial, and some of them are parasitic. Some of them infect people and animals, and some of them infect plants. So root knot nematodes are obviously a parasitic plant nematode. If you have root knot nematodes present in your soil and you're growing crops in that soil and they're actually producing fruit, unlike mine, which were completely affected and just not productive at all, you can still collect seeds off of those plants or fruits off of those plants if they are producing anything, and you're not going to get contaminated or infected with root knot nematodes yourself. This is a plant parasite, not a people parasite. Now, people can get infected with other kinds of nematodes, but those are not the nematodes that I'm talking about here. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, we talked about what nematodes are, some of the signs and symptoms, and also a couple of the treatments for them. There are other treatments that you can use for root knot nematodes that are still organic and natural, but I'm going to save those for another video specifically about nematodes because I'm not using those techniques here right now, and that's not what this video is about. So let's just get started with cleaning up the space. I want to show you around and show you what some of it looks like first of all, and just talk about what I'm thinking about keeping versus what I'm going to clear out. I I always think these transition seasons are really hard on the heart because I have a tendency to want to keep plants going, and it's really hard for me to say, all right, you're done, you're going out, I'm taking you to the compost pile, or I'm taking you to the garbage, because it is time for a different set of crops. So looking at a plant that is still growing and making the decision to remove it is just so hard sometimes. But if you want to have your space open for other things for the upcoming season, sometimes you have to make the hard decisions. So let's go through here and look at what I have growing and kind of think through what I should keep and what I should not keep. First of all, these Lozano tomatoes are the ones that grew so prolifically all summer long. And these are a hybrid variety. They will give you small, classic red cherry tomatoes. And these happen to be one of my very favorite cherry tomatoes to grow because they are so productive and they give you a nice red tomato that is just that classic tomato flavor. Let me see if I can pick one for you. Here we go. So here you go. This one is a little bit on the smaller side. I've actually gotten quite a few that were almost double that, but this is a really good tomato. I'm starting to get quite a few on here. So I want to explain what I did to these to get them so big at this time of year. So I decided to try pruning my tomatoes and my eggplants and even some of my peppers back really hard around mid-August. And what I was hoping was that those plants already had put all of their energy throughout the season into establishing nice, robust root systems, and that they would maybe come back and rebound. And instead of having to put energy into establishing a new root system like a tomato seedling would, instead they could just get right into the business of growing. And so far, I've had really good luck with that. So it was a lot less work. I didn't have to buy new seeds, and I didn't have to spend time tending to or replanting new plants. So it was actually a really great outcome for me. So that's what I did with these Lozano tomatoes. I cut them back so hard that they were basically like, I don't know, 8-inch little stems, and that's pretty much it. These tomatoes came back really well. So I did the hard pruning in mid-August, and so you can see the growth that is happening right now on these tomatoes. They're completely full of new green tomatoes. Just look at all of that fruit. And I'm starting to get some that are turning orange. You can see that one there. And there are a bunch more down inside the plant there. So I'm expecting a really nice crop of these. There are 4 plants in the stock tank, and I actually really love how they just drape over and just hang down the side like this. So I'll definitely be planting this variety again. This is probably the 3rd season I've grown these, and I really love them. I had a viewer comment that the seeds for the Lozano tomatoes were just so expensive, and they're not wrong. They are a little bit pricier when compared with other varieties. But when you think about the fact that you're paying about $5, I think, for 10 seeds, it's really not that bad when you think about the amount of tomatoes that 10 tomato plants is going to give you. So if you go buy a little plastic box of cherry tomatoes at the store, you're probably going to pay between $3 and $5 for them. And that is just one small box. But I was picking off of these 4 plants, probably 5 times that much every week. And that's just for 4 plants. If I had 10 plants, if I planted all 10 seeds, I would be swimming in cherry tomatoes, and they would be of much higher value than buying a box of cherry tomatoes at the store. So just think of it that way when you're looking at those seeds and feeling like they're a little pricey. So all of that to say, I am going to be keeping this tub of Lozano tomatoes, and I'm going to let them go until the first frost, which will probably kill them. Now for the next one right in front of that, these are my tomatillos, and you can't even see the stock tank that they are growing in. This stock tank is about 5 feet across. It's circular, and it's 2 feet deep, and they have completely filled this thing. Let me see, I think you can see the stock tank down below here. Yeah, but they are just spilling out onto the grass, and they have completely taken over the space, and they are filling the path in between the stock tank next to it. But they have been so prolific. Just look at all of the fruits and all of the blooms all over these. These are an amazing plant. I think there are 5 or 6 tomatillo plants in this tub, so there are quite a few. Like I said before, I usually will plant them in a little space by themselves because they just do not share spaces well with others. They turn into bullies and just take over everything. Ever since I found that snake on this patio, the rattlesnake, I've been pretty scared, honestly, and I know that I've got some overgrown spaces in my garden right now, which is the perfect habitat for snakes, so I have been really careful, even more so now than I was before. So I think what I'm going to do, just so that I feel a little safer and more comfortable, is I need to clean up some of these plants. Even though I'm not really ready to pull them yet, because they do have so many blooms and so many immature fruits on them, I want to keep harvesting off of them until the first frost, and keep some of them. I think what I'll do is go through and harvest everything that I can off of them, and then I'm going to take my hedge clippers and just trim around the sides just to get all of the large branches that are hanging down out and away. That way I can see where I'm walking and I can know that there isn't a snake hiding in the shade of those tomatillo plants, and that way it'll also make the space look a lot nicer too. And that way I can still harvest tomatillos, I can still let them grow, but I can just clean up that space a little bit. So those are going to stay. So right next door to the tomatillos is this massive round stock tank of tomatoes. Now this is the same size as this stock tank. They are about 5 feet wide, they're round, and 2 feet deep. And I planted some Juliet tomatoes. These are also a hybrid. They will give you Roma style tomatoes, but they are a little bit smaller. They are like a petite Roma style tomato. They are very, very sweet, but not very juicy. I really liked them just because of how prolific they were. I was getting just buckets off of these. They long ago overtook the tomato cages that I was using. I'd run out of tomato cages. I'd shared this before, so I was using these just metal old style tomato cages, and these plants got so heavy with fruit and foliage that they just bent those tomato cages in half. So it was kind of a joke even using them. These I thought were supposed to be a determinate tomato, which means that they would just produce the fruit and then be finished. But since the monsoon season, they have had a second life. I didn't prune any of these, but they started producing a lot of blooms and a lot of fruit. So I think I'm just going to let these go for the fall and just collect a little more fruit off of them. I don't need either of these big circular tubs right now anyway. It's going to be a little while before I want to plant anything in them for the fall and the cool season. So I don't need them now. I can let the tomatillos and these tomatoes finish up, and it's not going to make any difference to me. Usually for my salad garden that I like to grow in the fall and winter, I will plant that in the stock tank area, and that's because it's just so much more convenient. It's tucked up right next to the house. I can simply come out my back door, pick the salad that I want. We eat so much salad at my house. We'll eat a couple salads a day during the cool season just because the lettuce in the garden is so good then, and it's just a lot easier and more convenient. Rather than having to kneel down and get into the garden beds a couple times a day, I can just come out here and just pick it right out of the stock tank so easily. So that's what I'll use these for. It's a little too hot right now to be planting lettuce. I'm going to be starting lettuce seeds in the house so that way when it is time to remove the tomatillos and the tomatoes from the space, I can just do a switch. I will remove the big plants, I'll compost those, and I will top a little bit of compost, and then I will plant my lettuce seedlings right then and there, and it'll just be a switch, and I won't have wasted any time, but it will allow me to harvest a little more of the summer goodies while I'm waiting. No, the shed has not been painted yet. It is all buttoned up. It's caulked. The windows and doors are in. The gutters are on. The skylight's in. So we've got it completed, but we decided to wait until it was a little bit cooler out to do the painting, which will be starting next week, a little bit cooler. So we'll probably paint that really soon. In the meantime, I wanted to show you this jungle of tomatoes. They overtook their little trellises too. I found that those little metal tomato cages just do not cut it for a lot of these varieties. So I'm going to be getting rid of those and just replacing them with some bigger ones. These tomatoes I love. These are the Tidy Rose tomato. They're also a hybrid, but they are really prolific. A lot of green ones on here. And they will give you the pink beefsteaks type tomato, but just of a smaller size. I didn't cover these at all summer. I didn't provide any shelter to them, and they don't care, which is really impressive. I don't really want to reach in there because I'm a little worried about snakes. It's kind of a jungle, but let me zoom in. Can you all see that big tomato that is just hanging out back there? It's starting to get just a bit of a yellow blush, so I'm going to be having a delicious beefsteak tomato here soon to pick. As you can probably tell, those tomatoes are going to be staying in that tub for a little while longer too, just because I want to get that second crop of tomatoes for sure. So let's look at some of the other stock tanks, and we will talk about whether or not I'm going to be keeping those and what I'm going to do to get them ready for the fall. Right next to the Lozano tomatoes are my patio baby eggplants. I'm going to pick one of these for you. Just look how beautiful that is. That is just the perfect size. This is about the size you want. It's about the size of an egg, just to give you a little reference. And I love these. These are one of my favorites. I say one of. I think these are the favorite for me for eggplants. I grew these patio baby eggplants last summer, and when it came time for them to be killed by frost, they were doing so well, and I had enjoyed growing them so much that I decided I was going to carefully dig them up, put them into pots. I pruned them back really hard, and I took them in the house and put them on my little shelf that I have my plant lights on, and they survived all winter. I wasn't actually sure if they were alive because they really didn't leaf out a whole lot. They just kind of sat there and did their thing. But when I brought them out in the spring and I put them into the stock tank, they just exploded in growth, and I have gotten baskets and baskets of eggplants off of these. I've shared before, I love cooking them really simply. I just cut them in half, toss them with some olive oil, some sea salt, throw in a few garlic cloves, and roast them in the oven, and they are really good along with pastas. These patio baby eggplants are named patio baby because they do such a great job in containers. These patio babies don't get huge, but they do get a little bit bushy. If you put them in a 12-inch pot, I think that they would do really nicely for you. I'm tempted to try to overwinter them again just to see. I don't know if they will be as prolific next year. They might be getting a little old, but who doesn't like a good garden experiment? But for now, I'm just going to be leaving these in that stock tank for a little while longer, just like the tomatillos and the tomatoes. But everything else is going to get cleared out. So let's look at the stock tanks that were affected by nematodes. I grew the Ostia zucchini in these stock tanks. These were supposed to be a container-friendly variety of zucchini, and they were. They were really productive. They were a little bit smaller than a normal zucchini. I would say if you were going to grow one in a container or a pot, it would need to be at least 12 inches across to accommodate how large the plant will get on top. The leaves are pretty big even still, even though it is supposed to be container friendly. I wouldn't go any smaller than that. Since I had this 4-foot long stock tank, I put 2 in, one on each end, and they did really nicely for me in here. The one started looking a little weird, so I pulled it up, and sure enough, there were evidences of root knot nematodes. The root was really chunky and deformed, and this makes the 4th stock tank that has been affected by these nematodes, which was really disappointing. So now I am also going to be setting my sights on treating this stock tank as well as the other 3. So as I was looking at the second zucchini that looked okay still in the stock tank, I realized that it was also looking a little bit weird. So I pulled it up, and sure enough, it had the root knot nematodes too. So I went ahead and pulled both of them. When you have pests in your garden and you remove a plant because of that, it's best practice just to throw it in the garbage, because you don't know if you're going to be able to get your compost bin hot enough for long enough to kill diseases, pathogens, pests. So when I know for sure that a plant has a pest or a disease, I just pitch it. So I took these plants and I stuck them into my garbage right away. Also, since nematodes can be present in the soil, I've been really careful to use certain tools in those tubs and not in all of my other garden areas, because I don't want to get the soil all over those tools and then transmit it over to another garden area. So any tool I use in these 4 tubs now is only used in these tubs, and any plant material I get out of here goes right to the garbage. So I am going to be planting mustard in this one and also in this one right here. So I pulled everything out of here except for this little tomato. It actually looked fairly healthy. So I have high hopes that maybe this tub is on the mend. I grew marigolds in this one all season, so I'm hoping that maybe the marigolds really helped to knock back the nematodes. But even still, I'm going to be planting mustard in here and then chopping it up in the spring and blending it into the soil, because I don't want to take any chances and I don't want to give them any space to recover those nematodes. So that is being planted in mustard too, along with this one. So this one had marigolds growing in it all year. I've removed the marigolds that were in here. They're still kind of a sad and sorry looking little pepper, but it was actually very productive. So I just left it. I bet it's probably got some nematodes on it, but I'm gonna wait until those peppers ripen before I pull it to look at the roots. And just a little bit of oregano here, no big deal. This will also be planted in mustard. Lastly, I've got this one on this end, and the marigolds were doing great in here. I actually had a dwarf tomato in here too, and I know it looks really bad right now, but you'll have to take my word for it. It was looking really good for a while, but then I was ripping out a bunch of Bermuda grass here. So once I got all the Bermuda grass out, I think that I disturbed the roots on that tomato too much, and it just kind of started drying up. So I may just pull it. I'm not sure. This looks like actually like it might be coming back a bit, but we'll see. Otherwise, this is a jalapeno. I'm just gonna let that be for now, and I'll just plant around it. Also, some mustard in here. All right, so I was looking at my seeds and I noticed that I had 2 other kinds of mustard. So the first one that I was talking about was this giant red mustard. Like, look how pretty that is. And yeah, the sell-by date on it says 2020. I'm gonna go ahead and plant that really thick in this bed, and that's probably too thick for if you wanted to get a harvest out of it very well, but my goal here is to just really bomb those root knot nematodes. So it says that it needs to be, once you thin it, it should be 1 plant every 4 to 6 inches. So I will probably double that, honestly, because I have the seeds and I just want to make sure I'm treating really well for those. Now I have 2 other kinds of mustard. I've got this Mizuna. This is the frilly green leaf that you see sometimes in your spring mix. And I actually really like this mustard. It's just slightly bitter, but not as strong as that giant red mustard. And I do like putting it into my salad. So I do want to get a nice harvest out of this. So I might as well try. I'm going to try this one in one of the other beds and see how it performs. If it looks like it's just not going to take off, then I will just throw some of the red mustard seeds in there since I have extra to try. But I'm thinking that this one will do really well too, so we'll see. Then I'm also going to try another one called Gai Choi. So this one is another mustard variety, and this one says that you need to plant, one plant every 6 to 10 inches. And this one is more for stir fries, and it says stir fries and salads. So I'm gonna try this one too, just to see how it does. Now I'm only gonna give it a few weeks once it germinates, just to see how it performs. And if it really looks like it's struggling, then I just won't do it. But I'm hoping that maybe with the root exudates that these will have, as well as, you know, chopping up the plant matter in the spring, that it will go ahead and suppress the nematodes while it's growing, and then I can eat it while that's happening, and then also I can chop it up and mix it up into the soil in the spring. So that is my plan. I'm going to go ahead and plant all of these tubs, and we'll just see what happens. I will report back to you in a few weeks just to let you know how these are growing. So I'm going to plant these in these beds, and then we will talk about the patio, because I don't know if you noticed, but it is a disaster. All right, this patio. So a couple of years ago, we had used some leftover flagstone that was here at this house, left by the previous owners, and we made a little patio area. And it was nice, and it's actually been super functional, and it normally looks really pretty, but it's got dirt all over it right now, for one thing, because I was ripping plants out of here just a few minutes ago. But the other thing is that it's got more of that Bermuda grass that I have been battling in the rest of the yard too. So I'm gonna have to treat for that. I may use a 30% vinegar solution. One other viewer mentioned that, and I said, yeah, I had used it, and I do have quite a bit of luck with that on patio areas, but you have to do several applications of it. I don't want to use an herbicide just because I don't want to have that stuff near food that I'm growing, so I am going to try really hard not to use that. So my jobs are to plant my seeds, sweep the patio, spray with my first application of vinegar, and then I am going to move over here, and I'm going to harvest and then prune some of these tomatillos, and then also the tomatoes over here. So that's my plan, and hopefully my patio will look lovely. You may have noticed that I also have a pot full of mint, and I've got these dwarf runner beans. These have finally started to set some fruit. Beans a lot of times don't set very well. You'll get the bloom of the flower, and then the flower will just drop and you won't get any fruit set when it's 90 degrees or more. So I'm thinking maybe some of the cooler temperatures are helping this rebound. I don't know. It's probably not enough time at this point to get a harvest out of it, so I may just pull it. And then I've got a really sad looking tomato here. That one's gonna go too. And then in this pot, I had a dwarf tomato, and I also had some basil, and I've got a mixture of strawberries that are coming back and some lavender. So I'm gonna rip out the tomatoes. I'm gonna cut back the basil so I get a little more harvest. But this is usually the bed that I just grow those strawberries in every year. These are an alpine strawberry that I started from seed. They chilled all summer, didn't really do a whole lot, but they really produce quite a bit in the cooler weather. So that's what I plan to do with this one. So that is my plan for tackling my issue with root knot nematodes once again for another season, as well as what I'm going to be keeping and what my future plans are for this. So these transition seasons are really all about managing and trying to stay on time with things. So if you are wanting to grow lettuce in your garden, now is a great time to start the seeds in the house so that they are ready to go out in just a few weeks when the weather turns a little cooler. Lettuce seeds don't germinate very well when it's super hot, and lettuce plants don't do well when it's hot, they bolt. So, but if you can time that right and get your seedlings ready to go for when the temperatures cool down just a bit, still in a few weeks, it may or may not be cool enough. If it's not cool enough, I will probably just cover my lettuce seedlings with a shade cloth, and usually that does the trick really nicely. So that's another little shortcut that you can use if you want to get your seedlings into the ground, but the weather's not quite cooperating yet. So there are some options that we have. I will be back in just a little while to do a video on nematodes so that you know everything that you need to know about them, what to watch out for, how to treat them, and just know that these are the issues sometimes that we deal with in the garden. You know, I've heard of gardeners getting herbicides in their compost or their potting soil and it killing their plants because they bought it from a company that maybe didn't do the right practices. I've heard of people getting other pests, you know, from purchasing seeds from nurseries and things. So these things just happen. Gardening is a natural practice, and there are bound to be problems with pests and diseases. So it's not really about avoiding ever getting them. It's about knowing and identifying when they're present and what to do about them without having to break out every chemical in your house. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Until next time, happy gardening.